You're 3 weeks into the grid collapse. Your neighbor knocks. His kids haven't eaten in 2 days. You've got a stockpile in your basement that could feed your block for a month. You tell him no. You worked for this. He didn't. He leaves. You think you made the smart call. You didn't. A week later, your door has a mark on it. Spray paint. Red. You don't know what it means. But 3 houses down, the one with the same mark got emptied last night. You hear voices outside after dark. You've got the guns. You've got the ammo. You've got 2 years of freeze-dried meals. But you're alone, and they're 15. You had everything you needed to survive, except the one thing that actually matters. You didn't understand the game. 3 types of people die first in what's coming, and you probably think you're not one of them. Let's start with the most obvious casualty. The one you see at every gun show, every tactical expo, every prepper forum. He's got the plate carrier with level 4 ceramic plates, the AR-15 with the red dot, the magnifier, the flashlight, the laser, the backup iron sights. He's got the drop leg holster, the chest rig with 12 magazines, the tactical backpack with molly webbing covering every surface. 5.11. Blackhawk. He knows the brands. He's wearing them. He's going to die in the first 72 hours. Here's why. This guy believes survival is a gear problem. He thinks if he has the right equipment, he's prepared. He's not. He's built a museum exhibit of planned obsolescence wrapped in multicam. Let's do the math. Plate carrier with plates, 6 pounds. Rifle with optics and loaded magazine, 9 pounds. 12 spare magazines, another 8 pounds. Handgun and ammo, 3 pounds. Tactical backpack with 3 days of food, water, medical gear, 25 pounds. He's carrying 50 pounds of gear before he adds cold weather clothing, a sleeping system, or any tool heavier than a knife. Now put him in motion. He's trying to move through a city where every block is controlled by a different faction. He's trying to stay low, stay quiet, stay invisible. He can't. The gear rattles. The silhouette is wrong. He looks exactly like what he is. Someone worth robbing. But that's not even his biggest problem. His problem is that WW3 isn't Call of Duty. It's not a firefight. It's resource management. It's social dynamics. It's knowing when to hide, when to trade, when to talk your way past a checkpoint. The gear doesn't teach you that. The YouTube videos on plate carrier setup don't teach you that. And here's the failure mode nobody talks about. Gear breaks. The red dot loses 0 after you drop it once. The magazine spring weakens. The ceramic plate cracks. In peacetime, you drive to the gun store and buy a replacement. In collapse, the supply chain is gone. That $2,000 rifle becomes a 7-pound club the moment a firing pin snaps. He spent $30,000 over 5 years. He's got every item on every prepper checklist. He trained at the range on weekends. He thinks he's ready. He's not ready. He's visible. He's heavy. And he's alone. The visibility will mark him. But here's what actually kills him. What kills him is the ideology the gear represents. The core belief underneath all that tactical nylon. Survival equals self-sufficiency. If he has the right equipment, he doesn't need anyone else. He's wrong. Nobody is self-sufficient in collapse. You can't manufacture antibiotics in your basement. You can't gather intelligence alone. You can't maintain 24-hour security without sleep. You can't defend a perimeter by yourself against a coordinated group. Here's the scenario that kills him. 3 weeks in, he gets sick. Food poisoning, infected wound, doesn't matter. He's got the first aid kit, the Israeli bandages, the combat gauze, but he doesn't have the knowledge to diagnose what's wrong. And he doesn't have the antibiotics he needs. And he doesn't have anyone who can help him because he spent the last decade telling his neighbors he didn't need them. Or maybe he just needs sleep. You can stay awake for 72 hours on adrenaline. But after that, your brain stops working. Your reaction time doubles. Your decision-making collapses. You can't guard your house while you're unconscious. Someone has to watch the perimeter. But there's only him. So he dies. Sick and alone, or asleep when they kick the door in. And here's what the preparedness industry doesn't want you to know. 10 families need one trauma kit, one water filtration system, one set of tools. But 10 isolated individuals? They each buy their own. $30,000 times 10, $300,000 in revenue. The tactical industry makes money by selling you individualism. By convincing you that the hero survives alone, that asking for help is weakness, that community is a liability. They sell you the fantasy because the fantasy requires more gear. Look at the marketing. Every ad shows one person. One operator in the woods with his rifle. One prepper in his bunker. Never a group. Never a neighborhood working together. Because community preparedness doesn't scale revenue. The entire business model is built on isolating you, scaring you, and then selling you solutions that only work if you're alone. Every successful resistance movement in history was community-based. The Viet Cong won with networks, not individual gear. The Mujahideen survived Soviet occupation through decentralized mutual support, not superior equipment. But you'll never see that in a prepper catalog. The gear collector dies because he bought a lie. But at least he's trying. The second type? He thinks he's already won. He's got 50 acres in Montana, a bunker, 2 years of freeze-dried food, solar panels, and a well, perimeter fence, motion sensors, enough ammunition to fight a small war. He's spent 15 years preparing for this, done everything right. He's going to die. Not in the first week. Not the first month. He'll outlive the gear collector by a long shot. But he's statistically more likely to die than someone in a city apartment with a week of canned food. Here's why. His core belief. When the collapse comes, the cities burn. The masses kill each other. And he waits it out. Safe. Isolated. Self-reliant. He doesn't need anyone. That's the whole point of the 50 acres. But humans are social primates. Our brains evolved in groups. Isolation doesn't just feel bad. It destroys your ability to function. Month 1 and 2, he's fine. Better than fine. Euphoric. The world finally makes sense. The chaos he predicted is here. And he's watching from safety. Vindicated. Month 3. Things shift. He's making every decision alone. Use the generator fuel now, or save it. Is that noise an animal or a person? Every choice carries life or death weight. No one to reality check his thinking. Decision fatigue sets in. He starts making mistakes. Month 4. Paranoia. Every sound is a threat. He's sleeping 3 hours a night. He can't tell the difference between real danger and his imagination. No feedback loop. No feedback loop. No feedback loop. No one to tell him he's spiraling. Month 5. Depression hits. He has everything he needs to survive, but there's no point. No one to talk to. No purpose beyond the same routines. His cognitive function degrades. This isn't theory. Solitary confinement breaks prisoners faster than physical torture. Antarctic stations rotate crews because isolation causes cognitive decline after 6 months. Submariners need mandatory psych evals because the brain can't handle prolonged social deprivation. The cruel irony. He has the resources and knowledge, but he's losing the mental capacity to use them. Then there's redundancy. He gets sick, injured, a fall, an infection, appendicitis. No one to help, no one to keep watch. While he recovers, he dies from something survivable because he's alone. And if isolation doesn't kill him, predation does. Isolated targets are easier than group targets. Basic siege warfare. A fortified position held by one person can be waited out, starved out, burned out. 10 people who can rotate shifts and coordinate defense. Different problem. The lone wolf dies because he chose isolation. But here's what the preparedness community won't tell you about why that ideology is so popular. Why does every survival book, every prepper blog, every tactical instructor tell you to bug out to the wilderness? Why is the lone wolf fantasy so dominant in preparedness culture? Because functional community preparedness is a threat to centralized power. Think about it. The guy in the bunker, isolated on 50 acres. He's not a threat to anyone. He's removed himself from society. He can't organize. He can't coordinate. He can't build political power. He's neutered. The system doesn't fear him. He's exactly where they want him. But 50 families in a neighborhood with shared resources, coordinated security, independent communication, and mutual aid agreements? That's a different problem. That's a power base. That's resilient infrastructure that doesn't rely on government permission or corporate systems. And history shows what happens to those kinds of structures. Mutual aid societies in the early 1900s provided health care, unemployment insurance, and community support independent of government and corporate control. They were systematically dismantled. Union halls that provided community organization and collective bargaining power were broken up. Community defense networks were labeled as threats. Why? Because coordinated communities are hard to control. Isolated individuals are easy. The preparedness industry knows this. They push the lone wolf mythology because it keeps you buying and keeps you harmless. An isolated prepper spends $30,000 on gear and becomes politically irrelevant. A connected community spends $3,000 per family, shares resources, and becomes a force that can't be ignored. Look at the media. Every prepper TV show features one family in the woods. Every survival movie shows the lone hero. You never see documentaries about neighborhoods that built community gardens, local trade networks, and mutual defense agreements. Those exist. They work, but they don't get coverage, because if people realized that community prep is more effective than individual prep, the entire tactical industry revenue model collapses. And you can't sell the same water filter 10 times to people who are sharing. The business model requires isolation, and the control model requires isolation. So they sell you a fantasy where the hero survives alone, where asking for help is weakness, where community is a liability instead of the only thing that actually works. The gear collector dies because he's visible and isolated. The lone wolf dies because he's invisible and isolated. She's educated, successful, rational. She reads the news, understands geopolitics, knows tensions are rising. But when you ask if she's preparing, she tells you systems don't actually collapse. Things will stabilize. The government will intervene. People are overreacting. This is the most dangerous mindset of all. It's called normalcy bias, and it kills more people than bullets. Your brain uses past patterns to predict the future. When something unprecedented happens, something with no pattern in your experience, your brain rejects the data. It treats the anomaly as noise, not signal. She's not stupid. She's intelligent. That's the problem. Intelligence doesn't override emotional defense mechanisms. Smart people are just better at rationalizing their denial. Here's her timeline. Week 1 of the collapse. She's watching the news. Supply chain disruptions. Conflicts escalating. Infrastructure failures. She thinks this is temporary. Market's always correct. That's what history shows. Wrong. That's what recent history shows. The last 80 years of stability. But 80 years is a blip. Her brain is anchored to that blip. Week 2. Grocery stores running low. Gas stations have lines. She's annoyed, not worried. The government will handle it. They stabilize crises. She's seen it before. Financial crashes get bailouts. Disasters get emergency responses. This will be the same. Week 3. Power grid intermittent. Her neighborhood organizing patrols because police response is hours, not minutes. She's uncomfortable, but still not preparing. Because preparing means accepting the world she knows is ending. And accepting that means accepting she's vulnerable and at risk. Terrifying. Easier to deny. Week 4. Too late. Supply chains gone. Violence escalated. She has no network, no supplies, no skills. The people who prepared 3 weeks ago have organized. She's outside that circle. A liability, not an asset. By the time she accepts reality, reality has already killed her. The psychological mechanism. Normalcy bias is defense against fear. Accepting collapse means accepting you can't control the situation, that you're not safe. that authority can fail. This is why smart people die. Intelligence doesn't make you immune to cognitive biases. It makes you better at defending them. She builds sophisticated arguments for why collapse won't happen, why she doesn't need to prepare. That sophisticated argument kills her. Historical examples are everywhere. Weimar, Germany. People didn't believe hyperinflation would destroy their savings until their money was worthless. Educated people stay despite warnings because they've weathered storms before. Early pandemic responses. Rational people convinced themselves it was overblown until it wasn't. Normalcy bias doesn't care about your intelligence. It cares about your emotional need for the world to make sense. 3 types. 3 different failure modes. But here's the pattern nobody talks about. Look at what they have in common. The gear collector believes survival is a material problem. He's got the solution locked in. Plates, rifles, food. That's the answer. When reality shifts, when the problem isn't firefights but social dynamics, he can't adapt. His mental model is rigid. The lone wolf believes survival is independence. When reality demands cooperation, when his brain starts deteriorating from loneliness, he can't pivot. His mental model is rigid. The denier believes survival is trusting the system. She's got the solution locked in. Governments stabilize, markets correct. Things return to normal. When reality proves otherwise, when systems fail permanently, she can't accept it until it's too late. Her mental model is rigid. Rigidity is the killer. Survival isn't about having the right answer. It's about updating your model faster than reality changes. And here's what most people don't understand about WW3. It won't be one event. It won't be a declaration, a battle, a clear beginning. Supply chain breakdown, then currency collapse, then regional conflicts, then infrastructure failure, then government fragmentation. Each cascade requires a different response. The strategy that works in week 1 gets you killed in week 4. You need food, then you need security, then you need medical access, then you need information networks, then you need political alliances. The game changes every week. Rigid mindsets fracture under complexity. The gear collector can't shift from material solutions to social solutions. The lone wolf can't shift from independence to cooperation. The denier can't shift from system trust to self-organization. They die because they can't pivot. And here's the secondary pattern. All 3 are isolated. The gear collector is physically visible but socially isolated. He's alienated everyone with his tactical individualism. The lone wolf is physically isolated. He chose 50 acres and a fence. The denier is cognitively isolated. She's locked inside a worldview that no longer matches reality. Isolation kills in every form. Physical, social, cognitive. The pattern is clear. Rigidity plus isolation equals death. But if that's the pattern for who dies, what's the pattern for who survives? The answer is going to piss off everyone I just described. The survivors aren't preppers. They're not warriors. They're not the ones with the best gear or the most food or the most ammunition. They're translators, not literal language translators. Social translators. The people who can read a room, build trust with strangers, and move between groups without triggering threat responses. The ones who can change their strategy midstream without ego getting in the way. Here's the profile. High adaptability, low rigidity, comfortable with uncertainty, no hero complex. They see survival as a collective problem, not an individual achievement. These people don't have the best gear. They have the most useful skills. They know basic medicine, not advanced surgery, just wound care, infection management, basic diagnostics. That makes them valuable to everyone. Every faction needs medical knowledge. They know how to fix things. Engines, generators, water systems, radios. Again, valuable to everyone. You don't shoot the mechanic. You recruit the mechanic. They know how to mediate, how to de-escalate conflicts, negotiate trades, find compromise. In collapse, when resources are scarce and tensions are high, the person who can prevent violence is worth more than the person who can inflict it. Notice what's not on this list. Tactical skills, firearm proficiency, physical strength. Those things help, but they're not the core survival trait. The core trait is social intelligence, the ability to make yourself useful to multiple factions simultaneously. Because here's what happens in collapse. Power fragments. There's no single authority. Instead, you get dozens of overlapping groups with different resources, different goals, different territories. The lone wolf tries to avoid all of them. He dies isolated. The gear collector tries to intimidate all of them. He dies marked. The translator moves between them. Trades medical care to one group for food. Fixes a generator for another group in exchange for protection. Mediates a dispute between two factions and earns trust from both. These people become infrastructure. And here's the key insight. Infrastructure doesn't get destroyed. It gets absorbed. When one faction takes over a territory, they don't kill the medic or the mechanic or the negotiator, because those skills are too valuable to waste. Historical pattern is clear. Balkan Wars in the 1,990 seconds. The survivors weren't the fighters. Fighters died. The survivors were translators, medics, fixers, people who could work with Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks without picking a permanent side. Syrian civil war. Community organizers who could navigate between government forces, rebel groups, and local militias became power brokers. Not through violence, through usefulness. The people who survive collapse aren't the ones who stockpile the most. They're the ones who connect the most. They build social capital, not just physical capital. They're known. They're trusted. They're needed. And you don't need to buy anything to become this person. You need to develop psychological flexibility and practical skills that translate across contexts. This isn't about optimism. This is about understanding the actual game. Here's what you do starting today. First, inventory your skills through a usefulness lens. Not what you can do for yourself, what you can do for others. Can you treat wounds? Fix engines? Mediate conflicts? Grow food? Purify water? Make a list. Then ask which of those skills would make you valuable to a community under stress. Second, build weak tie networks now. Not just close friends. Weak ties. Your neighbors, local community groups, people at the hardware store, the farmer's market, the gym. Diverse connections across different social circles. When collapse comes, strong ties cluster together. Third, practice cognitive flexibility. Change your mind about something every week. Doesn't matter what. Update your position on politics, tactics, diet, anything. The practice of revising your beliefs builds the muscle you need when reality forces revision. Rigid thinkers fracture. Flexible thinkers adapt. Fourth, study actual collapse survivors, not preppers, not survivalists, real refugees, people who lived through the Balkans, Rwanda, Syria, Lebanon. Read their accounts. What actually worked? Adaptability. Usefulness to multiple factions. Fifth, share your knowledge. Teaching is trust building. The person who teaches their neighbor how to preserve food or treat infections becomes infrastructure. You're creating the network you'll need later. Now, here's why you've never seen this marketed. You can't sell it. There's no product. No monthly subscription. No gear to upgrade. The preparedness industry wants you buying plates and freeze-dried meals. This approach requires zero purchases. It threatens the business model. The system wants you isolated. Isolated people are controllable. Connected communities with diverse skills and mutual aid are political power. That's why the good information gets buried. Not banned. Just hidden under a mountain of tactical gear reviews and bunker blueprints. Actual resilience makes you ungovernable. 3 types die first. The collector, the lone wolf, the denier. 1 type survives, the translator. The person who sees systems, builds bridges, stays flexible. You can become that person. You don't need permission. You don't need a product. You need to understand the game. And the game is always about people, not stuff. Now I want to hear from you. What psychological prep are you doing that goes against mainstream prepper advice? Drop it in the comments, because the more we share what actually works, the harder we are to kill. Stay flexible. Stay connected. Physics doesn't negotiate, but people do.